Hello and welcome to a new edition of Through the Ages History. This video was voted for by my Patreon supporters, and today we are going to take a look at the oldest available Grandmaster footage of the International Championship. So we are going to take a look at the 4-player game of the International Championship Season 10 of the Grandmaster Division, the first season that was played over the website where we now can have access to the replay codes. And I was actually asking TtA if it's maybe possible to dig out even older games and the replay codes of those, but sadly they weren't able to do it. But still, a big thanks for taking the time to check if that is possible. And what we are seeing here is International Championship Season 9, so the season before the one that we are going to take a look at today. It was the last one of the International Championship seasons that was organized per mail, and it was actually the first one where I started playing. And if you are watching with your kids, please maybe cover their eyes for a little moment. Here's my group, which I was able to win. And yeah, that was my start into the Through the Ages tournament scene back then in the spring of 2020. And yeah, I was able to win that group before a player with a very infamous name. um, and yeah, we also see Irene here, who was the first one in the click rating for quite a while. But we won't take a look at one of my games today, but instead we will take a look at a 4-player game between Frotes, who won the season in Season 9, so we can see how he did in Season 10. Our invalidName, Pajada, who is of course still playing today and organized the International Intermezzo Championship for a very long time. So he will be part of that. And then Fizi, who won the Master Division of Season 9 and then joined the Grandmaster Division for Season 10. So we are going to take a look at that 4-player game, and the goal is just to see, how was the level that the players played on back then, and do we maybe notice some interesting stuff regarding to the play style and some evaluation of leaders and wonders and so on. I'm very excited to take a look at the game. I actually don't know how this game plays out yet, and I also don't know the result of this game because Ipogi provided me with a game code. I asked him to do this, and thankfully he provided me this game code so that I will be able to take a look at this game now without having seen it before, and so that we can maybe be surprised by some of the moves together. Alright, but now without further ado, we are going to take a look at the 4-player game of the Grandmaster Division of the International Championship of Season 10, 6 years ago. Alright, so here we are in the game. invalidName is playing in the first position. He actually joined the Through the Ages tournament scene, I think a year or maybe a bit longer ago again, but I think he wrote in the Discord that he realized that he sadly can't keep pace with the time settings and that he doesn't have time often enough to check the games. So I think he is now only playing in one of the few async tournaments, so the normal async, not the medium async that all of the other tournaments are in. So he's playing in first position, finished at the 3rd place in the season before. We have Pajada, who also played in the Grandmaster Division in the season before, Fizi, as we saw, who were ranked up from Master in Season 9, and Frotes, who at this point was the reigning champion. And first of all, we can take a quick look at the leaders and wonders. We have some science leaders with Einstein, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, but no spaceflight. There is Manhattan Project and Internet though. We have Internet and Beer as a combination. And there is also Chaplin and the Hollywood, Gandhi to hide behind, the Manhattan Project. In H2 we have Ocean Liner Service, Maria Theresa as a strong combination. There's the Harvard College as a strong wonder. Nobel and Newton are there, so the 2 science leaders. We have James Watt, but no railroad. We have Anthony Gaudi and Darwin as some culture leaders. Napoleon as a military action leader. In H1 we have Joan of Arc as a military action leader. Nostradamus and Genghis Khan to help with the strength. We have Columbus, but there's no Suez Canal, no Cook in the game. There's Eleanor as a transitional leader. Leonardo, but no Gutenberg is there. We have Himeji Castle and Great Wall, Silk Road but no Universitas, Forbidden City but no St. Peter's Basilica, and the Machu Picchu is there. Actually, that season At this point, the expansion was actually not released for that long on the app. I think it was the 3rd season that was played with the expansion, so the players at this point had already a bit of experience, but it was still relatively new. So yeah, I guess maybe they were still a little bit in the learning process at this point. And yeah, let's see what decisions they will make in this game. invalidName starts by taking the engineering genius. I guess that doesn't look too unusual, even though Confucius, I think, is valued quite highly nowadays, and I think some players would maybe also just go for Confucius here. Pajada takes the urban growth and Confucius, so yeah, that looks like the best pick in this position. Fizi just grabs the library, so wants to have one of those wonders instead of getting Moses and Aristotle, or Stonehenge plus the cultural heritage. I think that's a fine choice as well. And then Frotes picks the Rome roads and cultural heritage, so decides that he doesn't want to go for Moses, and instead maybe can reward it by some of those other leaders that could come out of the deck. So far, nothing too unusual. Now H1 starts, and invalidName will take the Stonehenge, the only wonder available for one civil action, so again that makes sense. Takes Aristotle, builds a mine, increases his population, so that he can push it the next turn while still having a free population, so that also looks quite solid. Pajada builds the second lab with the urban growth, elects Confucius, so we'll have a lot of science to work with, increases his population, and then takes the rich land, so he's just skipping the HA wonder, doesn't want to have the hanging gardens available, and yeah, maybe can get rewarded by an early iron, or maybe being able to go for one of those H1 wonders directly. Fizi increases his population and builds a mine, and then takes Homer for 2 civil actions, so that's somewhat expensive, but I guess the alternatives aren't that great, and Homer in 4-player games can be solid, so hard to tell what would be best. Maybe even taking the Code of Laws could be considered, but a bit of an awkward spot for him here, so I'm actually not sure how I would have played exactly in the situation without taking a deeper look, but that seems to be maybe what you kinda have to do at the end, maybe, I don't know. Protoss builds a mine, increases his population, and he also doesn't get a leader for one civil action, gets somewhat punished here for not taking Moses, but maybe can at the next turn still have a shot at taking Ashoka. invalidName goes for Aristotle, builds a step of the Stonehenge, another step, and another step, just goes for some civil action efficient use, so he delays the science, but he can use the civil actions very effectively instead of grabbing one of those cards for expensive. Which I think makes sense, even though with having Aristotle and the Stonehenge, maybe even grabbing Code of Laws for 3 civil actions could be considered here. Maybe that's actually what I would do here, but just playing it civil action efficiently is certainly also a good move. Pajada seeds and the development of markets are revealed. He interestingly actually takes the additional food, despite having delayed the mine for a while, but that means that he can increase his population at the next turn again, and especially with having missed out on a wonder, it might be important to be able to increase his population in order to get out of corruption, and with the additional science from the lab and Confucius, he gets now the early copy of Code of Laws. Fizi elects Homer takes the printing press, interestingly, and then builds 2 steps of the library. It's an interesting choice. Being willing to go for the printing press here, at least it's the only H1 card available for him for 1 civil actions, and there is Darwin, Anthony Gaudi, Leonardo da Vinci, so there is some synergy, nonetheless, for a 4-player game a bit unusual, and if I remember it correctly, that was before the printing presses got more popular on 2-player games, but of course if you skip the second lab and go into printing presses directly, that can sometimes work in 4-player games. Let's see how it will work for Fizi in this game. Protoss finishes the Roman roads and yeah, is not willing to pick up Ashoka here, interestingly. Could have just gone for Ashoka, maybe build a second lab and then start working, at some point getting some bonus out of Ashoka. Maybe that could have been fine, but just getting the Roman roads finished is also not bad, but I think the leader just provides a lot of value, so my first instinct would be to go for Ashoka here. invalidName this turn finishes the Stonehenge, builds the second lab, increases his population, takes the bread and circuses, scores the science with Aristotle, so that looks like a solid turn. There's Pierre in the game, and yeah, so invalidName so far just playing his civil actions extremely effectively or efficiently. Pajada seeds, the only player who has seeded so far. Development of trade routes is revealed. That means that he can this turn develop the Code of Laws. And then he gets the Forbidden City, but I think he has some issues getting out of corruption nonetheless. So I think he still, if he wants to get out of corruption, needs to increase his population and build a warrior. And that's also what he will do. A bit annoying, but I mean, maybe when the event deck will flip with him having Confucius, the warrior could still be relevant relatively soon. And yeah, he gets a very interesting first wonder now. Feeds the seeds and opens the development of science. He will finish the library, takes the swordsman, develops the printing press, builds one, so gets the science production going, and takes the swordsman as a military tech, skipping the early iron and alchemy here. Frotes this turn goes for Genghis Khan, interestingly. At least he will start producing a bit of culture and might have some help for the military later on. He takes the iron and increases his population and builds a warrior, also to get out of corruption, and thanks to the yellow token of the Rome roads, he is still not in consumption. invalidName, interestingly, is willing to take Nostradamus for 2 civil actions, interesting in the regard that there are some interesting technologies available for him that he could just take, and now that he takes Nostradamus, it probably will be a bit difficult to grab a bunch of those. Maybe he will also increase his population, build a warrior, and take one or more of those cards. At least that's what I could imagine, what he might do. He takes the iron, switches to Nostradamus already. I guess he might have enough science for now. Nonetheless, keeping Aristotle for another round could be interesting as well, but at least he will get some knowledge now, and if he has events in hand, can also start seeding them at the next turn. And then he can also go for 2 iron upgrades, and at least he is prepared for the event deck with Nostradamus. Pajada seeds, the development of settlement is revealed. He goes for the alchemy, goes for an upgrade, takes the cartography and a breakthrough. So again, a relatively efficient turn, only goes for 1 upgrade instead of 2, but if he goes for 2 upgrades, then it will take quite a while until he can finish the Forbidden City. So I think it maybe makes sense to actually only go for 1 upgrade and instead rather maybe grab those cards, and then maybe he can put his focus towards finishing the Forbidden City soon. Now it's Fizi's turn. He seeds, opens the development of warfare, but he doesn't have a free population available. Actually does, because the development before was the development of settlement. So he can take a free population from the development of settlement and then put it into the warrior. He increases his population, goes for the swordsman, can maybe now start using Homer's additional resources, also as the legion tactic, so with building a swordsman will be strongest for now, and then with the remaining 2 civil actions takes the irrigation and the knights. Knights with already having swordsman, a bit of an interesting pick, but it might deny some options from his opponents, and might still be nice to have for later on, and the irrigation might be nice to get into actually with having the possibility of building some printing presses. And going for printing presses might also synergize with Homer's happy face, so that it's a bit easier to justify maybe putting even a second population into printing press. Now it's Frotes' turn. He also takes the free warrior. He goes for some iron upgrades, 1 upgrade, and builds the second lab, so gets some economy going now, and is at least the second strongest for now, but let's see if he reveals the tactic. He has the phalanx tactic at least in hand, so goes up to 6 strength. Now it's Invalid's name's turn. He seeds and opens the development of agriculture. Let's see if he will just go for some iron upgrades. Indeed, he goes for 2 iron upgrades and takes the frugality. So also, again, just a very efficient move. So far, I think we can see that it's 6 years ago, but it's not too unusual stuff that happened so far. I mean, Frotes skipped Ashoka, completely skipped the leader, but at least he got now Genghis Khan, at least he gets a bit of culture income, but maybe that was a bit unusual. Taking Homer for 2, going to printing press is a bit unusual from Fizi, but maybe also a bit revolutionary, because I think this time printing presses were just seen as completely bad, even in 2-player games, if I remembered correctly, but he maybe sees some value in them here, and maybe he will be able to get Leonardo still, but yeah, so far the players just playing relatively efficient moves, and yeah, it seems like already back then the level there was a very solid level of play. Pajada offers an open borders agreement to invalidName, giving Nostradamus the additional military action, maybe a bit questionable, but he will go for Barbarossa. Maybe he was afraid that this gets cancelled, and also maybe he has to be the least afraid of getting hit from some aggressions or something. He will go for Barbarossa. I think Pajada already back then being known for liking Barbarossa, And I think he's also known, even nowadays, for maybe sometimes going for a lot of warriors. I actually didn't play a lot against him in the recent years, so I don't know if maybe things have changed a bit, but if you see a lot of infantry units, that's certainly a bit of a trademark pajada position, especially with also having Barbarossa. Pajada then takes the reserves, which he can use to either maybe help finishing the Forbidden City, or maybe even get another Barbarossa activation out, and you cannot unhappy workers from the Forbidden City and Barbarossa are of course also synergizing quite nicely. Pajada for the moment being the strongest, but Fizi can at this turn, if he wants to overtake him, goes for another printing press, increases his population, goes for another upgrade from warriors to swordsmen, is now at 8 strength, takes the rich land. Maybe could have somehow grabbed the Great Wall, but it would have been an expensive project, and instead he rather got a printing press going to go up to 4 science income. Frotes instead will go for the Great Wall. Great Wall and Genghis Khan, of course, being a very known combination back then, especially even before the expansion was out. I think that was a relatively standard combination of play. So he goes for the Great Wall here and has also now a project to use his resources on from the early iron income with revealing the medieval army tactic. He also gets stronger, but not stronger than Fizi, who is now able to win this border conflict. And Pajada, unfortunately, despite having put some effort into getting strongest at his last turn, is now actually the weakest again with the Nostradamus bonus for invalidName and will have to destroy something from this border conflict. invalidName goes for the monarchy, also goes for the code of laws. I think that makes sense. He has a lot of science to invest into, and having even more military actions when you're playing Nostradamus, I think, is not bad. So now he has this big iron income. He has 6 civil and 4 military actions. Maybe he can even go for Machu Picchu, Michi Castle, is prepared to go for some H2 wonders. So I think his position is actually quite strong, especially now that he got those civil actions up. Pajada seeds and opens the Reign of Terror, so he gets now really hit by some bad events, a bit unfortunate for him. He destroys one of his farms, which is of course quite a bit annoying, goes for the knights, goes for the iron, goes for the breakthrough, develops the knights, and then goes for a Barbarossa activation to get out of corruption and also to get stronger. This turn, I'm not sure if I would agree with that. The iron is quite late, but at least, I mean, he can get 2 upgrades going at the next turn. He might need to finish the Forbidden City first, though, because when he loses the 2 yellow tokens to the end of the age, he will have an uprising issue that he needs to solve. Maybe he can just spend a warrior, but maybe just finishing the Forbidden City is more efficient. And then the iron will be quite late, so paying 2 civil actions for that is a bit expensive. Could have maybe built a step of Forbidden City and playing cultural heritage here. So yeah, here I think maybe I would play it a bit differently, but the iron, of course, can still end up being useful here. And seeding with now going from weakest to strongest, maybe also a bit questionable, and maybe he could have avoided getting hit by this Reign of Terror here. Fizi indeed manages to go for Leonardo, so those printing presses are looking a bit better now. He is now at 5 science income, which is quite a lot and should allow him to relatively easily go into an H2 government form. He also goes for the knights using Homer's resource one more time and is actually destroying his HA lab. That's of course a bit costly, but I guess it might allow him to get out of corruption and take the strength lead. But then again, he's now losing 2 yellow tokens, so he might have to spend a swordsman maybe the next turn unless he gets some help from the event. So yeah, a bit weird, I think, destroying this lab. Maybe just having corruption could even be better. Maybe just destroying it. No, it's I guess a bit tricky. But yeah, at least he has still a good science income, solid culture income, and if he gets the government form in H2 quickly, maybe that can work, but he still needs maybe coal or iron. I think all irons are all taken, but coal, food upgrades, or a bit tricky his position, I would say. But his science income is strong, so that can always bring you somewhere. Frotes goes for the swordsman, can start upgrading those warriors to swordsman, is now 10 strength, the second strongest, still gets culture from Genghis Khan, upgrades to mines, has still just enough resources to finish the Great Wall at the next turn, and then he will very likely have the strength lead, and thanks to Genghis Khan he is also not falling behind in culture, actually has the culture lead for now even. invalidName goes for the bread and circuses, builds one, increases population again, gets out of corruption like this, builds an additional warrior interestingly, which He didn't need to get out of corruption. Maybe there could be some colonies coming, and of course now he is at 11 instead of 10 strength, so if there's something like call to arms or raiders coming, that could also be a reason towards building that warrior. And then he takes the Machu Picchu, maybe still has a shot at getting the irrigation, and will then have some very big production incoming, and with him being so low in science, it's also important for him to maybe find some wonders to invest his resources into. Pajada, actually, the age didn't end, so now he does have a chance to get into the iron, and that makes it a bit better. And having spent 2 civil actions on it the turn before, can go for 1 upgrade, takes the rich land and the irrigation for 2 again. Taking that relatively late in age 1 for 2 civil actions feels a bit expensive again. Building a step and playing cultural heritage, I think, might have been what I might have done. But he has Barbarossa. Also, he has only at 1 farm, so if he doesn't have the irrigation, there is certainly the chance that things could get a bit awkward. And so he was willing here to take that for 2 civil actions. He also adopts the phalanx tactic, but is still the weakest after his turn. Now age 2 will start, and Fizi goes for the irrigation, 1 upgrade, another upgrade. Let's see what he will disband to avoid an uprising. Actually a mine. So this is of course quite costly. On the other hand, if he disbands any unit, he will be the weakest after his turn instead of the strongest. So that's of course also quite costly. But yeah, the whole sequence of building 2 knights and now having to disband a mine doesn't feel too great, and he maybe needs some quick coal now in order to not have some big issues, or a quick government form, otherwise he might have some problems soon. Now frotes will just finish the Great Wall, is now the strongest, so I think that is looking quite strong now for him, but he's still in 4 civil, 2 military actions. That's a downside, but if he manages to find a way to fix that soon, then with his income and those 2 strong wonders, yeah, then it's definitely not looking bad for him. invalidName seeds and opens the Dark Ages, which he managed to avoid very nicely, maybe with some Nostradamus knowledge, while the others all get hit by it. He this turn builds 2 steps of the Machu Picchu, and then takes the Engineering Genius, actually for 3, which is interesting. But I guess he has almost no science, so maybe just being able to use the yellow cards soon and get some value out of it might be nice. On the other hand, with the Machu Picchu, we'll have lots of resources, and I think maybe I would have liked it more if I would be playing here to take the scientific method, because while you can't go into that immediately, at least soon you might be able to get into that. And frotes, I think, it's very likely that he will take the first copy of scientific method away. So maybe just securing that, being prepared for Newton, I think that could have been worthwhile here over the Engineering Genius. Pajada seeds and opens the Confucius event. Takes the Breton Circuses. So yeah, Pajada now for the 3rd turn in a row taking a card for 2 civil actions here, which maybe is not necessary, because he can just finish the Forbidden City here, and for now he has then enough happy faces or ignored unhappy workers to not have an uprising. Maybe the strength of the Breton Circus is something that he desires here. But there's of course also Pierre in the game, and Darwin and so on. Darwin is even coming down the row, so maybe because of that he was prioritizing it. But I think just finishing the Forbidden City and not spending 2 civil actions on the late Breton Circuses would be what I would prefer here, but at least for now. Goes for the Masonry also. I guess he still, it's his first wonder. He has already some H1 urban buildings, but can still save some civil actions. I guess that Masonry is maybe fine, even though he did take it at the cost of an iron upgrade. And then it's Fizi's turn. He has actually the most culture income, and with that gets a bit more out of this event. Takes the justice system, which is a bit tricky, because on one hand he needs more civil actions, of course, but despite having Leonardo, Library, and those printing presses, his science is somewhat low, also partly because he invested into both swordsmen and knights, and while the justice system is helpful for now, also with the blue tokens, getting into coal and an H2 government form now will be a bit tricky, and there's no Robespierre in the game, so it will be interesting to see for me now how he will be able to manage this issue that he is now having, because that actually could cause some issues, I think. And he has taken the Meiji Castle, maybe needs something to invest into, but with only +2 resource income is not Yeah, it's maybe still quite a big investment. So on Fizi's side, I mean, I don't think the last 3 turns or so didn't go ideally. I think maybe some not so efficient stuff happened here that now leaves him in a bit of a tricky position. Frotes seeds and opens the Enslave, all players gaining 1 science, and yeah, I think when the expansion came out, Nobel was regarded very highly, and to be honest, of course, he is still also seen as a good leader nowadays, especially early in H2. So I think also today that wouldn't be a surprise. Nonetheless, there's a scientific method available for 1 civil action. Let's see if Frotes will pick that as well. Because if not, then I'm not sure if I would go for the same thing. But he is taking it. He's going up to +5. Can maybe also go into a government format the next turn. Can go for 2 scientific method upgrades. Has the Nobel prizes. Skips the cannons for the Great Wall. But I do think that is, yeah, it's a strong turn that he did here, despite maybe delaying the scientific method. But he gets the science income from Nobel. So I think that looks quite strong what he is doing here. Now it's invalidName's turn. He opens the Crusades, Frotes still being the strong player thanks to the Great Wall, pajada still being the weakest player unfortunately, so loses 4 culture. invalidName finishes the Machu Picchu with the Engineering Genius and just goes for the Harvard College and Darwin. Yeah, I think that looks strong. Having now that big production, the Harvard College is exactly what you need. Now, not taking the scientific method is also not as much punished as it could have been. And Darwin also should be a solid leader with having those arenas available. Is also skipping the cannons, though. Pajada Seeds at the moment is not the weakest, but sadly now there's no strength event revealed. Instead, the historic territory. There's no Suez Canal, but Pajada can win it for just a warrior, maybe even go for Barbarossa activation at some point. For now, he is going for some iron upgrades, takes the Rifleman, upgrades some units, is now at 14 strength, so together with Frotes the strongest. But soon he will go into minus. He might have some famine issues, so at least he has the irrigation in hand, but that could be problematic. And also, yeah, the Forbidden City is now not looking as great because he has no more than enough happy faces, so I think those bread and circuses maybe not really necessary in this position. But of course maybe he didn't have knowledge about now being able to win this historic territory. Fizi builds a step off the Medici castle, allows him to get out of corruption, takes the cannons, copies to the medieval army tactic, going also up to 14 strength, and then takes the organized religion. I think actually floats the last civil action, interestingly. I guess he has to be careful about hand space, so good maybe that he didn't take the opera. Skips the coal in the Republic for now, but also doesn't have enough science to get into them immediately, and the coal should be available for him at the next turn. Also skips the strategy, though. But that's also maybe somewhat expensive for him. That means Frotes has now a chance to get into an H2 government form if he wants to. The immigration is revealed, so now at least Pajada gets rewarded for those happy faces. And Frotes gets into Conmon here. It's, I guess, a fine choice. I do think the Republic maybe is a bit more highly regarded nowadays than back then at a high level. So taking Republic Plus strategy might be fine as well, but it would take a while until you can go for these strategies, so I think it's maybe fine, and it still leaves him with just enough science to go into scientific method at the next turn. He then can increase his population, copy to the Legion tactic, and can take the cannons and the selective breeding, and I guess that's maybe also just a good reason to go for the Conmon here. Every civil action was important. Getting out of corruption by increasing his population, taking those 2 very important techs. So going for Republic, even though it gives 1 additional civil action, then he kind of needs to take the strategy, and then he would miss out on some of those techs, and it would take a while until he can go for this strategy, despite maybe being able to go into scientific method soon. So I think Conmon is definitely a fine choice here. Even though at those early stages of the H2, I think the 1 additional civil action from Republic can make quite a big difference. And of course also long term, even though long term the missing military actions also start to hurt even more. invalidName can this turn finish the Harvard College. He will take the strategy, a good card for him, I would say. Builds yet another warrior, going at least up to 11, now even at 14 strength, being able to develop the strategy. Then takes the efficient upgrade, maybe for a later scientific method. Or of course the selective breeding, which he would have enough science for to even go into that at the next turn. Pajada seeds and a call to arms is revealed. Pajada again losing something, but at least isn't the weakest player. That's Fizi at this point. But thanks to the immigration, Pajada can now rebuild this farm, so it doesn't have any famine. Goes for another upgrade, is now together with frotes the strongest again, and then goes maybe for a bit of a hate draft here. I don't think he plans on going for that coal. I mean, we will see it. It will be interesting. Also skipping those republics and maybe taking the coal away from Fizi, who is in an awkward position sitting at those two mines here. So, yeah, an interesting choice. It's a 4-player game, but we saw in the finals of the Australian Open that sometimes even 4-player games, some hate drafts can be worthwhile. If you maybe remember PV4, who took, I think, the Republic away from me, or also maybe Barbucha, who maybe could have denied a scientific method to PV4. So here Pajada decides to deny the coal. If it's correct here, I'm not sure, because he could have get some hand space issues, but I guess he will get Forbidden City, develop the masonry, and maybe he can allow it to go for this coal, but there would have been some strong yellows, so it comes at a price. Fizi increases his population, goes for the cannons. Let's see if he has a strong tactic for them. For now, even without a tactic, goes up to 17, but he has the Napoleonic army tactic, so his economy is relatively weak, or even very weak, at least in especially the resource income. But at least for now, he has the strength lead and has a good tactic to work with. And the reserves might help him to finish the Meiji Castle, and a second copy of coal is coming down the row. Those republics are actually ignored for now, so again maybe an indicator that back then those were seen as a bit more problematic, as today, of course, even today it's very problematic if you're stuck into military actions, but more often than not I still see players getting into republic even when they don't have a fix for the military actions right now. Frotes goes for some lab upgrades, is now at 9 science income, so that's quite strong, and at the next turn can then maybe fix his food income. And yeah, I think it's just still a very solid position, also at 30 culture. invalidName seeds and opens the scientific breakthrough just in time for frotes, or he was just in time with those scientific method upgrades, gets lots of science now, and invalidName will now take the second copy of scientific method for 3, interestingly. So not electing Darwin could have saved the civil action here, but maybe he knows that there is still some bad stuff coming, or maybe it would be danger of an aggression, but he has a lot of cards in hand, so he goes for some upgrades and then ends his turn. Could have maybe grabbed Cavalryman or Patriotism, so let's see if there's a bad event coming immediately. Pajada goes for Newton this turn. He has at least alchemies and has lots of science saved up, so he will be able to save just a lot of science with Newton, a lot of civil actions I mean, and at least produce a bit of additional science. Goes for the selective breeding, goes for an upgrade, is still not finishing the Forbidden City. At this point it will be interesting to see if he even plans on finishing that, or if he will just leave it unfinished. But I think with being able to develop the masonry for free with Newton, I think it would still be worthwhile to finish it at this point, but for now he will start his food income and then takes the patriotism. Not going for a second upgrade here, I think, should be an indicator that he still plans on finishing that Forbidden City. Fizi gets the second copy of coal, so Pajada's denial basically only delayed his coal upgrades by 1 turn. It's the question if that was really worthwhile at the end. Fizi then takes the breakthrough, the revolutionary idea, plays the reserves resources, and is willing to finish the Meiji Castle. I'm not sure, I think maybe he could have gone with the rich land and the resource of Leonardo, maybe for 1 coal upgrade already this turn, and then there should still be time to finish the Meiji Castle at the next turn. Maybe there's theoretical chance that the age might end with him taking some cards, but I feel like that could have been worthwhile to get the resource production going first. But we might see the reason to delay the coal actually coming down the road. There's of course James Watt in the game, and that actually might have been the idea behind Fizi not going for the coal upgrade yet. And that might also at the end maybe work out well for him, even though we can maybe take a look. I guess he has still the rich land in hand, but might still maybe, even with James Watt, might not be as quick to go for those coal upgrades. There was an event revealed, and it's the immigration, so nothing strength related yet. So it will be interesting to see if maybe now something is coming that justifies invalidName not going for Darwin at the turn before. Frotes has to lose a worker, and that might make stuff a bit awkward for him now, because now he has to disband something to not have an uprising. I guess he might have just disband a swordsman at the end, but still quite annoying. He can at least go for some food upgrades here, goes for the navigation and the cavalryman. Not going for the second upgrade to his farms, I think, is a bit costly, because it would have been quite nice to maybe increase his population already the next turn, but maybe I see some strong colonies, the navigation is giving him some strength, and maybe that's justification enough, and indeed he will at the end of his turn disband a swordsman to get out of the uprising issue here. invalidName seeds an event into the deck, and the developed territory is revealed, so immediately a colony revealed for frotes, but he's not able to win it, and instead invalidName is able to win it for 2 warriors. So let's see. He is now losing Nostradamus soon. Let's see if he can make a transition into a different tactic, because otherwise he might be a bit in danger, even though he still has the many military actions which might make him safe enough. He is going for the Rifleman, that of course is a helpful card, has also lots of resources. Actually developing the Knights here, building a Knight, a big indicator that he might have a tactic, or maybe he just also wants to prepare for the Napoleonic army tactic. Could even now elect Darwin and take the cannons, but instead actually takes the reserves and doesn't elect Darwin, so that's an interesting call. Again, maybe there are a lot of strength events coming, but Nostradamus he will just lose. Maybe there's also an iconoclasm that he maybe hopes to open in H3 and then elect Darwin. An interesting choice here to not elect Darwin, despite maybe already getting some value out of him and now being willing to even sacrifice the civil action that he would get by electing him and the culture income. So let's see if there are a lot of strength events coming in, if maybe Nostradamus' strength is actually still saving him some civil actions or some stuff that he otherwise would have maybe lost to some strength events. Pajada is indeed developing the masonry. Will he also finish the Forbidden City? He first goes for the monarchy, the conmon. Takes the cannons. Will he finish the Forbidden City? Actually not. So that's an interesting call. I mean, he has now some civil actions, but even more civil actions, especially being able to finish that efficiently with the masonry, I think would still be quite strong for him, and the ignored unhappy workers also would be handy at some point in the near future. So not sure if I agree with that. I think I would have just finished with the Forbidden City here, but I remember that Pajada doesn't like that wonder too much. At least that was his opinion some time ago. I think I think he wasn't really the biggest fan of that wonder, and maybe that was already back then the case, so that he is even willing to just lose that wonder now. But with being able to finish it with the masonry, I think you want to have that additional civil action here. Takes the cannons and the cavalryman, with that is nicely prepared for H3 tactics. Fizi seeds the strategic territory is revealed, and now the navigation of frotes comes in handy. Sadly for him, maybe it's just revealed before H3, maybe getting some H3 draws would have been even more interesting for him. Nonetheless, getting this for just a swordsman is quite a nice deal for him. Fizi will then go for the organized religion, develops that with Leonardo scoring a resource, then goes for James Watt, goes for the coal with the science discount of James Watt, goes for one upgrade, and needed to increase his population to not have an uprising issue. Still, his position being a bit challenging, not having a government form yet. Now that he lost Leonardo, is only at 3 science income. There's a scientific cooperation pact between frotes and invalidName, and that could be quite influential, I think, because both of them have very big science income. Both of them maybe even with the strongest position already anyway, so I think that could maybe lead to them now running a little bit away with the game here. So let's see how many technologies they will be able to develop with that pact. So that might give them quite a big boost now. Frotes builds a cannon, reveals the defensive army tactic, so now his position is getting quite strong here. He has the Great Wall with the defensive army tactic, the scientific cooperation pact, and then his generally strong economical position. So I think it's now looking quite strong for him, and he might really put some military pressure on the others here. He also upgrades one more farm, takes the frugality and the urban growth. And after his turn, we will be at the beginning of H3. And maybe you remember those World Championship games that I covered last year after I was eliminated out of the tournament. There I also commentated some games of the other players without knowing the result, and it became a bit of a tradition that at the beginning of H3 I did some predictions on how this game might end exactly, and I think it also could be quite fun to do this here as well. And as I said, frotes, with having the tactic, with having this pact, I think has quite a strong position. Let's compare it maybe to invalidName, who I think maybe has the second best position. Both of them have 9 science income. invalidName even better resource income. Civil action wise, it's equal, but invalidName is at least soon getting Darwin. invalidName is quite a bit behind in strength for now and doesn't have the biggest food income yet, so he's low in population, and that could be problematic for him now, being maybe threatened by the military and being in low population. Nonetheless, I think his position is still quite strong. Pajada, economy-wise, his position I think is quite fine now, but he's actually the weakest for now. And when we take a look at the culture score, he's actually by far behind at this point. So while it's still a difference that you can overcome easily in H3, the thing is that his economy, while it's fine, it's the question if it will be strong enough to overcome those culture deficits to frotes and invalidName. So yeah, I think Pajada definitely being behind invalidName and frotes, and then we have Fizi, who at the end of H1 going into H2 maybe did some questionable choices, and playing on 2 mines for too long I think is just not a great position to be in. Despite him maybe having dodged some strength events because of that, still I feel maybe he should have tried to at least stay on 3 mines in this position, and then he still needs a government form. And despite him having quite a big culture lead before Pajada, my prediction would be that he is in a big danger to lose this game. At least he has a good tactic, 1 more cannon, he has for now a very strong position militarily, he has Dimitri Castle to protect himself, but he can even just by impacts get punished quite heavily. Pajada has those H2 military techs available, so I would say my prediction is that Fizi loses the game, Pajada finishes 3rd, and now the question is who wins this game? Maybe frotes, because I guess he has this defensive army tactic that might just do just so much work, and invalidName, at least for now, being a bit behind in strength. I will say frotes wins this game, the winner of the season before will also win this game, and invalidName 2nd, Pajada 3rd, Fizi 4th. So let's see if I am as good as Nostradamus and seeing what will happen in the future. Or I guess what happened back then in the past, but a little bit less back then in the past than where we are at the moment. So H3 starts. invalidName seeds. And now maybe we see the reason why he actually kept Darwin in hand. I think it was a bit of a gamble. He could have also just lost Nostradamus to this iconoclasm, but now it actually worked out perfectly for him. Newton, Watt, and Nobel are all removed, so that is quite a surprise here. And sadly, sadly, I haven't seen this when I made my prediction. So now that is actually maybe big enough of a swing that I maybe would change my prediction already, because that is now quite something. And invalidName doing a gamble here, but it now paying off, and maybe that is the edge that he needs in order to maybe even win the game at the end. I guess that he now goes for the selective breeding, saves the civil action thanks to Darwin, and goes for 1 upgrade for now. This farm still produces 2 food thanks to the Machu Picchu, so it will be interesting to see whether he upgrades that at some point or just lets it be like this. He then takes some yellow cards, the architecture, and upgrades a warrior to rifleman to be at 21 strength. Pajada seeds, the arms industries revealed invalidName and Pajada and Fizi all gaining 4 resources out of that. Pajada, now that he didn't finish the Forbidden City, will instead go for the Statue of Liberty, which also helps him, but not sure. Maybe I would have actually preferred to have the Forbidden City here instead of the statue, but the statue, of course, also doing some work here. He plays the patriotism, goes for the cannons, maybe can adopt the Napoleonic army tactic now as a 23 strength, and can now take maybe those yellows, for example. That's at least what I would expect. Yes, takes the wave and the rich land, can upgrade his last mine with the rich land, and then his position is solid, but he needs to make up for a culture deficit. Maybe he can do this with a war potentially if he gets a good tactic. Fizi goes for an organized religion, fixing his issues, and I think him losing James Watt is quite bad here. Losing those discounts, just having been able to upgrade one coal mine with James Watt, and now maybe even he would have had the opportunity to go for oil. That definitely hurt him quite heavily. He plays the Revolutionary Idea, takes the Urban Growth, interestingly. Let's see if he will maybe take the Fundamentalism. No, goes for the Architecture, maybe leaves himself open for potential communism. Also doesn't go for Gandhi or Einstein here. Now it's Frotes' turn, and he first of all sees the Ravages of Time is revealed, costing him the Rome roads, which is a bit annoying. He definitely has some issues here. But what he also has is a lot of science. A bit of a shame for him that there are no Nobel Prizes in the game now, so losing Nobel also being a bit painful in that regard. And yeah, he just wants to have a new leader. Einstein giving him 2 science income back, what he lost from Nobel, and also starting to produce him some cultures. At least he got a quick replacement, Einstein not having been taken by Pajada and Fizi, and now Frotes being able to invest all of his science, so I think his position is back on track here. And that's good for me, because I of course guessed him as a winner here. invalidName could maybe go for Pierre here, but first of all offers an international trade agreement to Pajada. Gets some additional resource income, I think. He then increases his population, takes the air forces for cheaper with Darwin, takes Pierre, elects Pierre already, and then builds another arena. Maybe it could be fine to leave Pierre in hand here. Of course, it costs 2 culture, but there is definitely, especially with having so much science to spend, and the possibility of, still using Darwin to take some cards a bit cheaper, but he rather wants to have the additional culture income already. Also going for communism, maybe an idea, but actually that would immediately cause some uprising issues, so maybe that's why he didn't do that here. And I think actually he took a food income, if I receive it correctly. Yes, he could take the food income from the pact. Pajada seeds, the popularization of science is revealed. Frote is an invalidName, the two that I think are a bit in front here, also gaining more culture out of that event. Pajada increases his population, goes for another cannon, takes the military build-up, the reserves, goes for an upgrade, takes the communism. I do think that he just maybe tries to build up a bit of military here. He has this tactic, one more knight, and he's already somewhat threatening, and maybe he can do something with the military here, has those 2 cards in hand. Maybe if he gets some resource out of those, he could really make it to go for quite a significant amount of strength soon. Fizi will take the military theory. He certainly needs some help for the strength. I do think he could also just go for Gandhi here, because he is a bit in danger. He needs a new leader anyway, and at least for now, Frotes and Pajada and invalidName don't have enough military actions to declare war on him. So I do think that could be a good situation for Gandhi. Maybe even just take an elect Gandhi, take the military theory away. But with developing it, at least he makes it that he is the strongest for now, at least together with Frotes. After his turn, Frotes will win the tiebreaker. Frotes seeds and opens the freedom of movement. Let's see how he will use it, or even if he even finds a way to use it. He interestingly puts a worker from iron into the cannon, but he will stay at a healthy amount of resource income with going for that oil that he can develop quite cheaply with the pact and score some culture with Einstein, and then he may freeze up a worker basically and still will have some good resource income to work with. Goes for 2 oil mines immediately. An early oil can definitely be quite strong in 4-player and 3-player games, so he then also develops the movies. Maybe it's one of those situations where you want to make sure to just develop a bunch of things while you still have this pact, because if you leave yourself with tons of science saved up and same text in hand, then the other player might just cancel it, but invalidName also still with so much science in hand that he might have just kept the pact anyway. invalidName uses the freedom of movement to put a worker from iron into scientific method. Still is at 6 resource income thanks to the Machu Picchu. It'll be interesting to see if he can actually spend all of the science. He doesn't have a science leader, at least he has the Manhattan Project now, so it will score him more culture thanks to having the 3rd lab. But I can imagine that maybe he will have some difficulties to spend all of the science, is maybe now hoping for a quick democracy soon, can develop the architecture, and then actually finishes the Manhattan Project already. It's now at 35 strength, and with that the strongest, and I think with getting the culture from the Manhattan Project, he also has the culture lead for now. Pajada develops the cavalryman, takes Churchill, so he again setting up some strong military stuff. It's a bit annoying for him. He maybe could have developed a cavalryman with Churchill, but he had a full hand at the beginning of his turn, So I'm not sure if he maybe could have played the reserves or something like this. Maybe that wasn't easily possible, or maybe even the wave. Let's see how his turn continues. He just takes the Air Force. I guess if that is his idea, just securing the Air Forces, and it's the second copy, he might not have another chance to get one. He can get Churchill. Then maybe that's what you kind of have to do, but it's a bit annoying. It also makes it that he doesn't have enough science to go for the Air Force already the next turn, but if he has a good tactic, maybe he will be able to do something here. It's a bit low in military actions though, so maybe Fizi could end up regretting not going for Gandhi early on. And then Pajada uses Churchill for the culture, does it manually. So that's something that you can do if you don't know that. You can click on Churchill and just get the 3 culture. And yeah, he doesn't want to have the 2 resource here. I think that also got him out of corruption actually. And he has the modern army tactic, so that gives him quite some military potential and maybe could open up a door for him back into the game. But culture-wise, he's falling more and more behind. So I could imagine that even if he gets a war going, it still needs a bit of preparation. And maybe it's not enough to win the game, because unless he gets multiple wars going, will be interesting for certain to see how his military plan will play out here. Fizi uses the freedom of movement to put a swordsman to cannon. Pajada also put an iron into military units, so something that frotes did as well. Fizi goes for the satellites, but goes very low in science here. Takes the revolutionary idea on the patriotism. Maybe he needs to hope for democracy here. The satellites, of course, at least giving him some strength, and he sees what Pajada is doing, so maybe he will just take any bit of help that he can get for the strength. But again, he could have maybe had a chance to take the fundamentalism earlier, and if he had that, he could have maybe just revolted into it at some point to get a government form going and a big help for the strength. So I think that could have been an interesting choice for him earlier on. And now, yeah. If Pajada gets a war going, maybe my prediction will be correct that Fizi will lose this one. Maybe if Pajada doesn't find a war or something, then Fizi's culture lead might be big enough to stay in the game. Frotes goes for the civil service, develops it, takes the air forces, has the last copy, and with that should be relatively safe together with his Great Wall. Has lots of civil actions now, scores some culture with Einstein, so his position is still looking strong, but he's a bit behind in culture compared to invalidName, who will now increase his population, builds a knight, takes the professional sports, the reserves, the urban growth, and then develops the professional sports already, and has a lot of resource yellow cards in hand. But I mean, his military potential might not be too high. It's not the most resources, has no good tactic yet. If he wants to go into the Napoleonic army tactic, maybe needs the rockets. If he had a classic army, I think he would have revealed it already. Of course, he is still in the completely fine numbers for now with the Manhattan Project, but if Pajada pulls off something big, invalidName certainly could be a bit in danger as well, but because the culture gap is even bigger to invalidName, maybe Pajada would rather try catching up to Fizi. Pajada not going for any wars or stuff for now. I think he still needs some preparation to do. Plays the military build-up, goes for an arena, and then goes for some more units. Can at the next turn go for air forces. Doesn't take any card from the row. Really wanting to make sure that this game goes on for a bit longer, but even with not taking any cards, I think the next turn might be his last one to war. And then he can go for 1 air force. And then it's the question if that is enough. So, yeah, let's see if he gets a big enough war going. But 1 air force, of course, is still somewhat threatening. And there is also, of course, a chance that he might even have a hybrid war available. Fizi takes the modern infantry. Having an H3 unit makes it that he can sacrifice even more efficiently for the Meiji Castle when there is one big war happening. So I think it makes sense to take that one here. And then he plays the revolutionary idea, makes it that he can maybe develop the modern infantry at the next turn. He has to expect that there might be a war coming, probably also did some calculations already. Refugees are revealed, Pajada getting a 3 population, so that event just being revealed after he got strongest. Good timing for him. invalidName will now lose a population, which might be good for Frotes, who will now go for the military theory, develops it. I feel like he at the end got the most techs out of the scientific operation pack, because invalidName has tons of science, but maybe just didn't have the civil actions to develop all of those techs. And that's what I said when he put the iron mine into the lab, that it helps him for the Manhattan Project to score some more points, but I was doubtful on whether he will be able to spend the science. Maybe the additional resources would actually be more helpful right now, because it might help him to build up a big military. And then Frotes will increase his population, builds another arena, takes the revolutionary idea. invalidName will take the rockets, so maybe he wants to prepare for the Napoleonic army tactic. Let's see if there's a copy of tanks left. No, so he can't really go for the modern army tactic. Copies the Napoleonic army tactic already, takes the reserves, plays those reserves actually for food, but he has 8 plus 8, 16 resources, so at least enough for a rocket and an air force. Let's see if that will be enough. He also declared the Olympic Games right now, which is annoying for Pajada, makes it even harder for him to overcome those big culture gaps now with the war. So let's see if he has a war, and let's also see which one will be the target. My guess would still be Fizi. Of course, I haven't done any calculations right now. I think frotes is definitely safe. invalidName, maybe not completely, but the gap is even bigger. And Fizi is not as much ahead in culture, could get punished by some impact. So I think if Pajada has a war, he might have to try it against Fizi here and at least play for the 3rd place. And that's also what's happening here. He declares war on Fizi. Let's see if it will be enough for him to overtake Fizi. Uses Churchill, develops the air forces, builds one. He doesn't have a hybrid war, and with that only is able to build one air force. Takes the fast food chains, builds 2 stages with the masonry, and then with the engineering genius can even finish a wonder, which also might help him, of course, to catch up in culture to the others. Fizi will go for the modern infantry, plays the patriotism, destroys one of those printing presses that he built very early in the game, builds the modern infantry, upgrades one, upgrades another one. Interestingly, he's not going for another knight. He could have destroyed something here and gone for another army. I think that should be worth it, right? That would be quite a lot of strength. So instead of one of those upgrades, just build a knight, and that would be plus 6 strength. I'm not sure about this. I guess he might have knowledge about some impacts, but that's just a big culture swing, and he has to be afraid that Pajada might overtake him now, so yeah, that looks a bit questionable to me. But maybe there's a reason that I'm not spotting at the moment. Frotes opens the prosperity and has the most happy faces, so a lot of food is gained, but I think there's no red cross left in the game. There's no red cross in the game at all. He builds a movie, builds another swordsman. Something weird is happening here. A little bit graphical glitch here. The one unit of swordsman is a bit more behind than usual, and it looks a bit weird. And he also goes for one more air forces, now at 69 strength, takes some more text to develop with Einstein, and already develops the cavalryman this turn with the Rev idea, should be able to develop those two even when he now loses the pact. And then the last round starts, and we can maybe take a quick look at how the culture scores are at the moment. And I think we might have a situation where there's a fight for 1st and a fight for 3rd place. I think with this war it might get close between Pajada and Fizi, and it remains close between invalidName and Frotes. I think it was already close for me on which player I guess as a winner at the beginning of Age 3, and it's still close between them. So let's see which player will end up being 1st and which player will end up being at the 3rd position. The last round starts. invalidName offers a military alliance to Fizi. Maybe being more afraid of Pajada catching up. To be honest, I feel like probably invalidName doesn't have to be afraid to be catched up of any of those. I guess there could be an aggression happening and stuff, maybe even multiple aggressions. But yeah, not sure. Maybe he can just not offer the pact and not interfere, but I guess we might have, of course, done some calculations, and maybe there is actually a threat that Pajada might overtake him. He is now increasing his strength, is getting a late democracy. That's maybe one thing that went a bit unfortunate for him. He went for that additional lab that he actually now lost. He had tons of science, but the democracies were very late. If he would have gotten one earlier, I think that could have given him a very big boost. He then increases his population one more time, builds an air force, and with that also isn't really afraid of any aggressions here, and just gets some additional strength. I guess the strength still might matter, might make it a bit more, in the case there's an impact of strength and he doesn't want to offer it to Frotes, so then in order to get the strength just from him, he just has to interfere in the war. So yeah, that of course then makes complete sense for him if he doesn't have anything else available. Pajada steals 49 culture from Fizi, is still behind, but he is the one who will be able to finish a wonder here. Is trying a raid against Fizi, but Fizi is able to defend, has to sacrifice a modern infantry though. Did he sacrifice modern infantry against a war? Yes, a cannon. So he actually made sure to keep a bit stronger maybe, so that he is then able to defend against an aggression. Pajada increases his population, finishes the fast food chains for 22 points. But he is still not that nicely prepared for impacts here, so not sure if it will be enough for him to finish before Fizi. Again, manually using Churchill, that's maybe a bit of his trademark move as we learn here. And then he takes the democracy and oil. Fizi increases his population, plays the patriotism, goes for chaplain, could be impact of happiness, upgrades the temple, and wait. I guess he should have just built a unit here. I mean, maybe he has knowledge about all impacts where that unit could matter, but even then you don't want to give away that knowledge, so maybe he just forgot to drag that worker into knights or something, I don't know. Or I guess he could even build a cannon, right? He could even build a modern infantry, so let's see if that might matter at the end, maybe if there's an impact of competition in the deck. But so far I think there are not that many impacts actually, only 3 and all of them seeded by frotes, so maybe that is what could allow him to win this game at the end. He goes for the computers, goes for the mechanized agriculture, so didn't finish a wonder, but gets a lot of culture out of Einstein, upgrades, builds a movie, and then ends his turn. And when we take a look at the culture score, frotes doing of course a piece of art here, ending his turn with 111 plus 11 culture. That's of course, if you're able to do that, you definitely have to do that, so very nice work here by him. And that leaves him still with 2 culture behind invalidName, so it will be very close between them, but with frotes having actually seeded all of the impacts in there, I can imagine that maybe my guess could end up being right. Then between Fizi and Pajada I'm a bit less confident, because there are just a lot of impacts. I guess Fizi is also not that great. I think prepared for some impacts. I guess it might get really close between them, and they are of course now at the mercy of the impacts that frotes seeded into the deck. But I'm a bit less confident for Pajada here, but he has a 5 culture lead, so it might be that my guesses actually might work at the end. Let's see how this game ends. There's an impact of colonies, which doesn't really change that much. I think good news for Pajada, gets 3 points against Fizi, but frotes so far not being able to catch up to invalidName. Then there's an impact of balance, that's a bit better for frotes, already allows him to overtake invalidName, and it's also a bit better for Pajada. So now Pajada has a 10 culture lead, it might be enough to just to keep his 3rd place. And the last impact is an impact of happiness, plus 16 for frotes for invalidName. Actually only plus 8 for Pajada, and Fizi is catching up here, but it's not enough. So that was quite close actually. So quite close between frotes and invalidName, and quite close between Pajada and Fizi. Between Pajada and invalidName there is actually quite a big gap, but it was very, very close. But at the end I actually was correct with the guess, despite this early iconoclasm, which I think was very impactful. Frotes at least got Einstein very quickly, and with that managed to get enough culture out of him to at the end win this game, despite there being no Nobel Prizes. As I said, invalidName getting a bit unfortunate here with the democracies being so late. If that is available earlier, I think that could already give him enough value to just win this game. He was definitely in a good position. And then Pajada being able to work up towards that war, was behind in culture going into H3, but then focused on getting those military techs down, did get a modern army tactic and a war. Fizi had a chance to get into Gandhi, but didn't take the chance. Maybe should have done it, maybe that would have been the way to secure at least the 3rd place for him. So an interesting game to watch. And when we take a look overall at what happened here, not too much unusual stuff. So not a lot of turns where we would say from a nowadays perspective, whoa, what is happening here? What did those guys do back then in 2020? So that I think didn't happen too much. So overall, I think the level of play even though the expansion wasn't out for that long, was already on a high level. I think Fizi maybe maneuvering himself into a bit of an awkward position. Maybe that's something that with maybe the level of play generally has, I hope at least, gone up a bit over the years. Maybe that's something that we would see more rarely nowadays in the Grandmaster division, but of course it can still happen. But maybe not that. I think there was maybe not enough pressure ongoing. Sometimes there will just be an extremely big military push by someone that forces players into awkward positions. Here maybe it was a bit more deliberately, and I think it was foreseeable that it might cause some issues. Also the printing presses being a creative move, but not really paying off here for Fizi. So maybe there are some slight inefficiencies. Pajada at the end of H1 picking a lot of technologies for 2, letting Forbidden City just be discarded. That were some awkward moves maybe, but a yellow token from the Statue of Liberty maybe helped him to get enough population out to pull off this war. But here also maybe some moves I would do a bit differently nowadays. And yeah, but it was quite interesting to take a look at this game and relive some through the ages history. But now that we have taken a look at this game here, we can maybe also see how this season ended and yeah, how the results looked at the end of the season. Alright, and as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, that was the first season that was organized over the website, so we could take a look at the result of the season at the website, but back then pajada did still those nice overviews where you can very quickly look over some groups, so we will take a look at the results of the season from here. And what is also interesting is that we are going down to the wood divisions here. I think when we remember how the season before went, when things were still organized over per mail, I think it only went to the silver division. So the start of the tournament website really made it that a lot of players were joining those tournaments. It was of course such a big help for the organizers, and also you can just play the games. The results are then immediately shown instead of having to make screenshots and send them per mail, and then the tournament organizer manually having to put the results into, I don't know, the Google Sheet or something. So yeah, that of course led to immediately a lot of players joining, and that was actually also the season where I played against Vlada. That game was also one part of the 3 Ages History series that we saw on this channel. One game where I played against the game designer actually. That was my second season in the International Championship. But let's first take a look at how the season ended of the game that we've just seen. And we see that frotes very convincingly actually managed to win the season with 30 points. So already won the season before. And yeah, back then he was just one of the strongest players and showed his strength quite dominantly in the Grandmaster division of the International Championship. invalidName is again winning a medal after the bronze medal in the season before, now a silver medal. Fizi in his debut season in the Grandmaster division didn't have a good performance in the game that we just saw, but overall I think he also, if I remembered correctly, was a bit more of a 3-player specialist, and in 3-player games maybe the printing press play also would have made a bit more sense, or maybe has higher chances to work. And he managed to win this bronze medal. Dr. Renate staying in the league, Silence staying again in the league, and pajada, unfortunately, with 15 points, which often is enough to stay in the league at this point, got relegated, while Himmelstosh had a hard time in the season, only scoring 4 points. So yeah, that's interesting seeing those results. And what we also see is that this was the season when DJ Parson ranked up to the Grandmaster division. That was a big highlight back then. Back then, despite us now being able to take a look at the replay code, there was no replay feature yet at this point. So I still was very hyped. I remember that I was very hyped when DJ Parson ranked up to Grandmaster, because that meant that on his YouTube channel, if you don't know him, because maybe some of you actually don't know DJ Parson, because he ended making videos like 2 years ago or something, but he was the biggest 3 Ages YouTuber, and back then already covered some of his games. There was no replay feature. He had to put a lot more work into doing videos than I am doing nowadays, because he had to record every turn that he did and then put them together to a video after the game ended. but back then that was the only way of seeing some Grandmaster games, and I was very hyped when he ranked up to the Grandmaster division, as I was new to the game and I wanted to watch a lot of content, and that was then very exciting. And yeah, let's see if we can maybe spot some more interesting players. I think we have already at some point taken a look at this when we took a look at my Vlada game. Yeah, we can see Dots, Chengisip ranking up, Irene ranking up in those gold divisions. We have Tyrant Ropi ranking up into the Master division, who is still, I think, the highest rated 3-player players today. Is mainly playing in the Transcontinental Ladder, but also in the Survivors Cup at the moment. So yeah. And yeah, with that we have finished our trip back to the year 2020, seeing how the Grandmasters played back then. Already back then, I would say quite a high level, not a lot of obvious mistakes that we saw. Some maybe slightly inefficient stuff, maybe something could be improved potentially, but overall the players managed to put themselves into strong position, especially frotes and invalidName. And yeah, so already back then, players played at a high level. I would imagine that probably the level of play has still increased by a bit, but yeah, definitely not some new play that we saw in this game. And yeah, let me know if that was an interesting video for you, if you maybe enjoy something like that in the future again. The World Championship groups for the next stage actually got seeded and will be starting soon. So in the not so long distant future, we will maybe be able to take a look at some of my World Championship games of stage 6, and I might also consider showing some commenting on some games from the upper bracket group, because that is stacked with some very, very high caliber players, and then I could do some commentary like I did it in the last year, and maybe on at least some of those games of that group. Let me know if you are interested in that as well. And yeah, it's always interesting taking a look at those older tournaments. Maybe I will at some point, for the nerds of you who enjoy such a thing, do a video where I just take a look at some older results of those tournaments, seeing how the players went up and down and which names show up and which players were very dominant at which time. So also, if you're interested in that, let me know. I'm not sure. It would be a lot of work probably, but I would be kind of nice, because those tournaments are going on for that many years that it's hard to remember what happened in the International Championship in 2023 or in 2022. And of course, there's the Hall of Fame, and you can see which player was able to win how often. And it's, of course, already a nice way, but maybe checking some of those old results could be quite interesting. All right, but with that, we are at the end of the video. I will be on holidays for a week soon, and I think probably I won't be able to record another video before that, so there might be a bit of a break again. Maybe I will find a time for one more video, but likely not likely we will hear again you will hear from me again in August. And yeah, then I say thanks for watching, have a nice time, and see you in the next video.